And I think that there's two big things on the horizon. One is, I think we're working really hard on some of these small molecules and these interventions that can maybe add 5, 10 quality years of life. And we're really close to that. And in animals, there's already multiple. If you're a mouse with discretionary cash, it's great because there's like 5 or 6 things you can do right now.
Yeah.
Humans, we haven't quite worked it through. But on the horizon are things that you can ingest, and it will turn the clock of your DNA back 20, 25 years, and you can redo that every 20, 25 years. And when that happens, it's just going to be amazing. We can already do it, but all kinds of problems accrue. So the 10-year thing, how we can live to, on average 115 rather than 100, that's really could be very short term. How we can get to 200, that's a possibility. Just that one's further off on the horizon.
Right.
But there's this amazing thing, and then I'll kind of shut up because you got me started, which is a bad thing. When the embryo, when the egg hooks with the sperm, that's not a zero. That's a very old egg and a sperm because the mom's potentially 40, the dad's potentially 40 or 50. And at week 3, something magical happens. The body recognizes the age and it re-zeros at 3 weeks. So that's this mechanism. It's called the Yamanaka factors. He won a Nobel Peace Prize for it, where you take this old egg-sperm combination embryo and you reset it back to 0. And they're working like crazy to do that in your whole body. So, the future is just, I can't wait to see it. And that's what's going to keep, they're going to have to drag me out physically when I die, in the cowboy boots, because I want to be around and see all this stuff.
Hello. I'm backstage currently in Canberra, in Australia. Look at the glamour. The glamour never ends on tour. I'm about to do a show here. Played in Sydney last night and Brisbane a couple nights before that. A couple more shows on this after hours tour down here in Australia. I've been down here for 2.5 months filming The Voice and then doing my tour here. And I do love Australia so much. It's been incredible to be here. Just like it was last year and the many, many years before. I think this is my 21st trip to Australia. I've lost count, actually. But the tour's going great. My band's here. We've been having fun, especially doing some of the new songs from the After Hours album, which was #1 here in Australia. Thank you to Australians everywhere. And I hope you guys are well. I'm excited to be dropping yet another episode of Stories to Tell today. Mainly because my guest is one of my oldest and dearest friends. Not just because he's old. You would never know he's old. We've been friends for 40-something years. 44 years. I'm going to go 44 years. I think I met Rob when I was 18. I moved to LA from Chicago, and I needed a doctor. I needed a physician. I needed just a GP, general practitioner. And I was recommended to Rob Huizenga by the great Lionel Richie, who I was working with when I was 18. And so Rob became my doctor when I was 18, and he's still my doctor today. But through the years, we've become buddies, like we're brothers. I love this guy. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. He's an incredible physician. He cares so much about his patients. He's always trying to be on the cutting edge of what's happening. And the most curious, interested guy. And we covered a lot of topics on this conversation. And I don't know I can't remember if we mentioned it or not, but we do get, people mention that we look alike, like we could be brothers, which I take as a great compliment because I think Rob Huizenga is a very handsome man, much more handsome than I But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Stories to Tell. We've got a little bit more coming. It's been hard to film episodes because I've been in Australia for months and I'm touring, and I've got this Rod Stewart tour coming up where I'm his special guest. And but we are grateful for your support. And for now, just sit back and enjoy a very different kind of conversation for this show. My special guest on this episode of Stories to Tell, Dr. Robert Huizenga.
I don't know. I'm going to just call you Rob.
Rob is good.
Because that's what I've always called you.
Hey, you.
Among other things. I was saying that this should be full disclosure for this episode. Yes, it is the renowned physician, Dr. Robert Huizenga, but he's my buddy Rob for 44 years.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even realize it was that long, but that's getting up.
Dude.
Yeah, you were still in high school. We were like
Pretty
sending
much.
tutors for you pretty much.
I was just out of high school.
Yeah.
And Lionel Richie, that was my first job when I moved to LA, fresh out of high school. So I just turned 18 and I was singing with him, and I'd moved to LA and I was like, I need a doctor here. So Lionel was like, oh, you should go to my doctor, whose name we won't say, but he was your former partner.
Right.
And so I tried to book an appointment with him, and he was like, no, you can see my young assistant, my young partner.
I think he was just stepping out with Wolfgang Puck at that point.
Yeah, he was busy. Yeah. So I went in to see you, and as you reminded me, I did have a mole.
Yeah, you had a little mole that was bugging you.
Well, I was starting to become photographed, and I was starting to do.
And you were up for a movie. I recall that. And
yeah, it was not like an Aaron Neville mole, or it wasn't an unsightly mole.
More
like
a Marilyn Monroe.
Yes, it was like a Marilyn Monroe mole on my forehead, and it bugged me. So you were like, I got a guy, he'll just...
Yeah, it was no big deal.
But that's amazing that we, have known each other that long, but I love that I think it was just a matter of a year or two before we became friendly, and then we started to
I don't know what exactly happened. I just always remember Faye's comment about, what the implications are if you're friends with your doctor.
Yeah.
You remember his famous quote?
No.
He was saying, you're friends with your doctor? That makes you very old.
Right. Only old people are friends with their doctors.
Only old people hang with their doctor.
That's true.
It's like...
Well, but I was like, have you seen my doctor? He's like he's not that much older than I am. And he's like this Robert Redford fucking, you reminded me of that. There was an old SNL skit when Mel Gibson hosted pre-controversy, when he was still handsome and...
Jesus, right.
And the skit was Mel Gibson, dream gynecologist. And all these women were lined up in the waiting room because when he would walk out for the next patient, they'd be like, and I'm sure you had plenty of that, where somebody booked an appointment with you and then you show up and you're all handsome and stuff.
Although I look back on some of those comments and I had a couple of people say, you know what, you're just, you're too good looking, you're too young. And I'm like, shit, why doesn't anybody say I'm too young and leave me now? It's just like, it's really upsetting.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, you've had an incredible career, and I was saying that usually this show is just conversations. We shoot the shit about all kinds of stuff. With you, because we've been friends for so long, and that's what we normally do, I made questions. I wrote out
you're
questions.
You're scaring me now.
And I'm going to refer to my questions because I was like, oh my God, these are the kind of questions that I get to ask you on the record, and I don't want to just get off on some tangent and lose my place here. So, first question, you ready?
Hopefully.
What's the biggest misconception about healthy people that you see on a day-to-day
basis? The biggest misconception is people think they're really healthy when they're eating well and they're exercising some, but really the majority of those people, certainly even in Beverly Hills, are kind of skinny fat. So I think the biggest misconception is that I'm really fit because I look good in clothes, and sadly that's not true.
Okay, but is that just a function of they don't do the right testing to alert them
Well,
to
no one does the right testing because doctors don't get reimbursement for doing a body composition. So one or two of the three most important things to know about a person: what's your body composition, how much of you is fat, how much of you is muscle, how much of you is bone, how much water do you have in your system. You don't get reimbursed for that. So crazy people like me just, do it on everybody. I don't care if I don't get paid because, how can you take care of a patient if you don't know that? And the other thing is, what's your VO2 max?
Right.
What's the total ability of you to exercise? And, we write down, oh, you work out 5 hours a week, you do this and that. But at the end of the day, it's like, get on that stupid treadmill. How far can you go? And that really determines what your fitness is.
Right. And I noticed things like, and I haven't done one of those in a while with you, but two things. One, you were, I think, cutting edge in that long before we had pre-nouveau scans and those kind of things. I used to tell people when we would compare notes with a friend about your doctors and your physicals. I would come to you every other year. Oh, well, for a while I would go to you every year because I
can't remember. It's probably every other year initially.
But I would explain what it was like to come and get a physical with you. It was like 3 hours, starting with vitals, and then you'd sit there in a gown. And you would come in with a fucking stack of shit of every note you've ever made on a patient. And you would have kind of done a little bit of pre-homework, and you're like, okay. And you would say things to me like, so like 5 years ago, you had a little itchy rash on your finger. Let me see. And you would follow up on everything with history. But then I would wander down the hall and I would get this scan or I would get that test, or I had to do body fat analysis and all that. You were doing...
Yeah, we had nutritionists work with you. And
yeah,
it's just now starting to catch on. So it's funny. A lot of the things that we were doing pretty intensely are kind of coming around with some of the current, internet things. And it's all for the better. I think people are getting better healthcare now than they used to 10, 15 years ago. And that's why, on some of these crazy shows that I've been on, when you see the level of care people get around the country, it's just pathetic. It's really sad.
Yeah. Well, and following up on what you just said, the other thing I noticed personally is, as someone who is, I feel generally very fit, especially for my age, you also get maybe a false sense of what your VO2 max is because you're conditioning yourself in a way that you're maybe not challenging yourself in the ways that you should. So, for instance, I'll go do that hill around the corner that we've talked about. The infamous 330 steps, basically, really steep incline. And I'm constantly trying to beat my time. And I'm really out of breath. And if I do a walk, a brisk, I don't run, but if I'm doing a really fast walk of 3 miles, I'm feeling so good. But if I go in and you put me on a treadmill on a certain incline for a certain amount of time, I might be like, shit. This is not what I'm used to. I'm not conditioned for this.
That's how to quantify it and kind of bring it together and compare you to other people your age. Because at the end of the day, we want you to be in the top 2 to 3% of people your age. We don't want you to be fit. We want you to be super fit, because even though it falls off and you get the majority of the benefit of exercise after you work out, let's just say the first 3 or 4 hours of the week, every incremental hour up to probably 10 hours, you gain additional benefit. And that's why, if you're in the top 20% of people in the whole country, that's great, but you get better longevity if you're in the top 2%. So we're pushing even super fit people, and they get a little sick of that, when, I start jawing about exercise, but that's always been one of my passions. So, I like to motivate myself sometimes when I talk to other people and try to motivate them along with me.
Oh, I'm going to get to that. Is there one blood marker or diagnostic test that you think should be standard that is not?
Well, that would be the VO2 max, because that really brings everything home.
How can that be an elective test? How could that not be like...
It's difficult to do. To get an accurate VO2 max, you need a mask with, oxygen CO2 determination. But you can get a really close estimate just by going on a Bruce protocol, which is this protocol where every 3 minutes you start out, you're going super slow, 1.7 mile per hour at 10% grade. Then every 3 minutes you rack it up.
Right.
At the end of 9 minutes, all of a sudden you go to 4.2 miles at 18%, and you're just going straight up a hill. So you can do a really good VO2 max without getting the mask and all the really tricky stuff. That's one thing. And then the body composition. I mean, those are two that should go hand in hand.
Do you do the VO2 max test? That you have one at your office, right?
Yeah, we have one.
Do you do it on yourself
Sure,
periodically?
I'm a total nut. So I do my VO2 max every 4 to 6 months. And like I'm due for it right now and I'm getting nervous because I'm trying to stay with what I did at age 65. And as I'm getting older and older, you know, the further you get away from that, all of a sudden I'm getting a little panicked myself. And, you know, but it's a great motivation. So there's a number and I got to stick with that. Otherwise I'm really getting older. And so it's been a really good thing for me to, you know, self-motivate.
Yeah, you kind of glossed over something just now. So Rob's notorious for a couple of things, if you're friends with him over the years. And one of them is he will not tell anyone how old he is. He's kind of scrubbed it from the internet so that there's only conjecture.
That took a lot of money.
But the fact that he just referenced, you know, I'm trying to, you know, I'm measuring myself to when I was 65, which obviously means he is north of 65. That alone,
Well,
looking at you,
that's very kind. But
no, well, I didn't finish yet.
mean,
Maybe I was going to insult you. I was going to say, man, you really let yourself go. No, it's remarkable. And I know that a lot of it is that you have, since I've known you, you've always been an athlete. You've always maintained your physicality. But I've also watched you, well, we've kind of done it together. Whereas we've gotten older and we've learned more, you have never sort of relied on what you used to do to stay fit or what you used to have as your diet. You're constantly
gotta reinvent things.
Yeah, reinventing. And that's something that I obviously you pass on to your patients as well.
Yeah, because things change and you get bored with some things and you have to find different passions. And if it's the same thing, that's great. But, you know, people that decide they're going to run in their gym and, you know, ride a cycle against a wall or run on a treadmill against a wall or an elliptical, it just doesn't really play out over time. So you really have to incorporate outdoor exercise. You got to incorporate social stuff with other people. And you got to make a mix somehow. And then maybe you can do some of the really boring stuff, running up and down stairways when you're at different hotels, playing different concerts in different states. But, you know, you do have to do something almost every day, if not every day.
I've been doing more of that. I've been actually taking stairs in hotels, especially if the gym is shitty and I don't want to be in the gym.
Well, it cracks me up because people go, yeah, well, I was on vacation. I'm like, well, were you in a hotel? Were you in a motel? Is there a stairwell there? You know, like, the craziest one is, well, yeah, I didn't have access to a gym. Like, did you have access to stairs? Did you have access to tennis shoes in the outdoors?
Well, forget that. Did you have a towel in your hotel room that you could lay out and just like in your underwear?
Do curls on your mattress.
Yeah,
I mean, you can innovate. You know, you can do triceps right here, but you know, you have to just recognize that. Forget the activity. Do you want to be sharp when you're getting older? Do you want to still have it? You know, do you want to have better sex? I mean, all these things are integral, but you have to work at it. It doesn't just happen. You know,
absolutely.
and look at our parents. Look at our grandparents. I mean, when people were 65, it was over.
Game over.
Game over.
Yeah.
And part of that's an attitude, and part of that is just activity. And I think, you know, you're my just general generation are the first people that were trying to do some different things earlier in life. And you still get our parents that never lifted a finger outside of just whatever their daily activities were or their job.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're going to see what the effect of, you know, some of our earlier life things. But, you know, the reason why I love what I do is I can't wait to see what happens in 10 years. Things are changing so fast.
I really want to get into
with
that
exercise, with longevity, that I think my big thing is just to stay alive when these big developments are going to appear. And, you know, you definitely aren't going to benefit from these huge anti-aging things that are going to present in the next 10 years if you're dead from a heart attack.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, let's dive into that. I wasn't going to this early, but since you brought it up. So starting with a dear mutual friend of ours, one of my oldest friends, was diagnosed about a year and a half ago with MS. And it's a gut punch. And he's really, really struggling, and it's really taking a toll. And what I said to him was, I had a long conversation with him where he was a little despondent, and he was like, look, if this is where this is going, and I said, dude, we're at a point where literally a year from now, or 6 months from now, it's not just a fantasy that there could be some breakthrough with MS, with cancer, with any number of things. Knowing what you know and the people you talk to on a daily basis, how much of that am I overstating? Or is it really like with AI, aren't we going to see exponentially a really rapid amount of treatments and cures that, like, even from 1 week to the next, we're going to be like, oh my God.
Well, no question. I mean, is that time frame a week, a year, 5 or 10 years? I really honestly think it's 5 to 10 years. I think that the big change is going to be as we get older, 80% of all the maladies that befall us are age-related. So if we can stop aging, we can stop 80% of cancers, we can stop, 80, 90% of heart disease. We can stop Alzheimer's, which is essentially totally, unless you're really unlucky and get some of these very rare genes, we can stop Alzheimer's. So I think that, every week, is it going to change in a month? Probably no. But, 1 to 5 to 10 years, that's a finger snap.
Yeah.
And it's going to be in that time range. And I think that there's two big things on the horizon. One is, I think we're working really hard on some of these small molecules and these interventions that can maybe add 5, 10 quality years of life. And we're really close to that. And in animals, there's already multiple. If you're a mouse with discretionary cash, it's great because there's like 5 or 6 things you can do right now.
Yeah.
Humans, we haven't quite worked it through. But on the horizon are things that you can ingest, and it will turn the clock of your DNA back 20, 25 years, and you can redo that every 20, 25 years. And when that happens, it's just going to be amazing. We can already do it, but all kinds of problems accrue. So the 10-year thing, how we can live to, on average 115 rather than 100, that's really could be very short term. How we can get to 200, that's a possibility. Just that one's further off on the horizon.
Right.
But there's this amazing thing, and then I'll kind of shut up because you got me started, which is a bad thing. When the embryo, when the egg hooks with the sperm, that's not a zero. That's a very old egg and a sperm because the mom's potentially 40, the dad's potentially 40 or 50. And at week 3, something magical happens. The body recognizes the age and it re-zeros at 3 weeks. So that's this mechanism. It's called the Yamanaka factors. You won a Nobel Peace Prize for it, where you take this old egg-sperm combination embryo and you reset it back to 0. And they're working like crazy to do that in your whole body. So, I mean, the future is just, I can't wait to see it. And that's what's going to keep, they're going to have to drag me out physically when I die, in the cowboy boots, because I want to be around and see all this stuff up close.
But only, let's be honest, only if it's quality of life.
Of course.
Because you don't want longevity.
No one wants,
where you're laying around
you
like
really want healthspan because you don't want to be the 80, 85-year-old we saw in our grandparents where they basically were devoid of life. This is a whole new era where, we don't think you age like this anymore. We think you actually don't age that much from age 70 to 90 if you're lucky enough not to get an injury, if you're working out every day. It's taking a month off on vacations. It's getting a surgery. It's getting an infection. Then you drop and you can't get back up to 0. So we think aging is a discrete number of drops, not a slow, gradual drop. So that's why I'm hoping in the little research we're doing to see if people age mid-60s to mid-70s, if we can maintain a VO2 max, if we can maintain functionality, because that's what we're thinking we can have happen.
I mean, you just mentioned something else that I think is important for people who are listening to this. We did a vacation together with a group of great pals and our significant others a few months ago. And it was a week of just fun in the sun and, exotic location. and we were catered to. It was super beautiful and nice. And I noticed that you and I were exercising every day. You were getting up at the crack of dawn. I was sleeping in, but I was getting exercise every day. You could make the argument, well, I mean, come on, you're on vacation. Why can't you just chill out for a week? Well, there was a time when I was younger where that would have made sense to me. But when I hit 60 a couple of years ago, I decided the most I'll go is 36 hours because I start to feel it immediately. If I go a day where I have no physical exercise, which is super rare, but if I'm on a set, on a TV set or something, I'll still do, squats, or I'll do push-ups, or I'll do something. And when I get deprived of what I consider a good hour or so of physical exercise, I get tired, and I don't feel anything but like missed opportunity. And maintaining, because like with you, I want to maintain I want to have at least 25 or 30 years, but at the top of my fucking game.
Well, you're an endorphin junkie, which I love,
Totally.
and that's what differentiate you from Oprah and people like that have all the resources like you do, but really hate exercise. And sadly, probably 20-30% of people are like that. Even when you introduce them to exercise, they just don't get any benefit from it that they can feel. And so we have to tell those people, hey, do you like to brush your teeth? You gotta exercise for your hour a day. But if you have no immediate feedback, if you don't have that drug effect you and I have, it makes it really hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you look at brain scores in people that exercise without exercise, when you look at mood levels, when you look at your ability to produce, it's just night and day different. And so that's why it's essential if you really want to perform at a high level, but it takes time. There's no free lunch.
Right. And part of it is also I'm married to Daisy Fuentes, and I want to keep that spicy.
That's a little incentive.
Yeah, and we have to let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. Talk about the correlation as we get older between sexual function and and having a great sex life with the other things that you have to do to get there.
Well, I mean, part of sex life is, how you feel about yourself, and that's where exercise is important. Part of it's testosterone. We know exercise is very important for keeping your testosterone up. Part of it is for, energy. You have half the people are struggling to have sex more than, 5 or 10 minutes because their fitness is so horrific, or, what we faced on The Biggest Loser multiple times. When people gain too much weight, it's actually makes intercourse very difficult.
Sure.
So there's just so many different levels about taking care of yourself that aids in, connection with your partner. So,
but you told me something. I just remembered something you told me years ago, maybe 8 years ago, maybe. You said you wouldn't believe how many young athletes are coming to me to get Viagra.
Well, in today's world, it is interesting. There's just so many, especially with the way dating goes down now with apps and whatnot. So you have this fear factor, or you have an initial nervousness or almost trying too hard. So there's like a huge number of people, incredibly young, college, early 30s, that initially in a relationship, it's too much stress, and they want to perform. And by wanting that much, that's a reason for, erectile dysfunction. And fortunately, we do have a great out, because emotional erectile dysfunction, you take a Viagra and that disappears. But yeah, it is really interesting. I think given the way dating goes, and people, I think especially guys, are under a huge amount of pressure. If you can't perform, they feel inadequate. And the minute you even don't perform great once, then it's a returning cycle, and you can never dig yourself out. And the more you want to perform as a male, often, those are the times you start going, okay, I hope it works, which is just the death kneel to intercourse.
Yeah, the minute you start thinking about it too much, you've defeated yourself.
Right.
It's also interesting, in terms of help people when you age and the, the natural decline, I guess, if you will, of testosterone, but that we men have, we've got a pill we can take. Women, I mean, the stuff that women are going through during menopause, it just seems like really lagging behind. Am I wrong?
Oh, you're majorly correct. There was a big study came out in 2002. At that point, 40% of women in the country were on hormone replacement therapy. A study came out, estrogen causes cancer. So boom, like that, they pulled all the hormone replacement therapy from women. And literally overnight, you saw these high socioeconomic women, everybody was sweating in unison on an airplane because they're all going through hot flushes. So sadly, on revising the data, two things became apparent. Number one is they overestimated the risk of cancer. And at most, it was like 1 in 1,000, which is less than 0.1% increased risk if you were on the estrogen. And many people believe the placebo group was incorrect. And they were using a synthetic estrogen and progestin. And most people believe that if you use the natural versions, that you would get none and maybe even be protective of breast cancer. So we're finding out the entire woman physiology, the vagina, the labia, all the system is estrogen and testosterone dependent, and it just atrophies and goes away. Like, can you imagine if there was a tendency for men to have the penis atrophy and disappear at age 52? You think Pfizer wouldn't be working days and nights overtime not to find a treatment? And we have a treatment, hormone replacement therapy, which is grossly underutilized in this country.
But what do you make of that? Is it? I mean, I don't want to say, is it just that we're still in such a sexist
it's
society?
a struggle to understand.
How is that not?
Why there is the resistance. And the funny thing was, just to talk more science, in that arm, there was an estrogen-only arm, and then there was a synthetic estrogen and progestin. And here you did have this increase, 1 in 1,000 in cancer, if you believe that data. But in the estrogen-only arm, there was less breast cancer. So why is there a black box on estrogen that says will cause cancer?
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of incongruities that, your theory is as good as any.
Yeah. Well, while we're on that, can we talk a minute about...
I didn't realize you did a sex show.
Just wait. Talk to me about... There's going to be some controversy topics here. So if you're a woman in her 50s who has a history of breast cancer, but you don't carry the BRCA gene, there's good news. But you have a woman in your family, your mother, your grandmother. Aren't we at a point now where mammograms should be looked at more closely as being not beneficial because of the radiation? And what they ultimately find and don't find?
I think in the group you just illustrated, though, that's the one group where mammograms are very helpful because you have a higher risk woman because there's a family history, albeit with no BRCA gene. So those are the people where you're going to get more bang for your buck with, mammograms. The other thing is mammograms have come way down in the amount of radiation they do have.
Oh.
And if you believe that you've had radiation from other sources, or you just absolutely don't even want whatever minimal risk, even if the benefit outweighs the risk, there are other approaches. You can do an MRI.
Breast MRI. Why wouldn't...
Cost.
Cost. Because it's not covered by insurance, a breast MRI?
May not be covered by insurance, and there may be a slightly increased risk of false positives as well.
I see.
But it's substantially more expensive than mammograms.
I've noticed you, literally in the last couple of years, I've seen a shift in you where you've gone from, let's just do the scan, to, I don't want you to do the scan.
Well, it's interesting because let's take the flip of longevity. What if you came to me and said, Rob, I want to get older. I'm doing this movie and I want to be so authentic. Make me 10 years older. What would we do? Well, first off, we'd go crazy. We'd blast you with radiation. We'd give you the amount of radiation that, maybe we'd give an individual with cancer.
Right.
And then I'd say...
You'd have me eat nothing but sugar all day.
Eat sugar all day. We're going to keep you up all night. And we're going to give you the worst sleep. We're going to give you kind of a jet lag phenomenon. stop exercising and we're going to basically have you gain weight. And we can magically, the radiation being the key factor, we can magically age you. So given that, do I really want someone to be taking, multiple abdominal pelvic CAT scans that clearly have some level of risk? We can argue about the amount, whether it's negligible or not, but yeah, that's how you age people. One of the groups that we really want to get a hold of are kids that get radiation therapy and chemo when they're 15 for leukemia, because we just made them 10, 15 years older.
Right.
And that's the group, if anybody really needs age reversal treatment, they're it.
Yeah. But can you point to, because I feel like there was a shift that happened very clearly with you specifically, where I heard you in when we would discuss things, whether it was me or my boys or Daisy or whatever, and all of a sudden I just really felt this. Was there something that you went one day? You went, I'm moving away from scans.
I think it was in the mid-teens, 2010, 2015, when I really just every night read about longevity and what it took to get older, what it took to get younger, and just went, I'm going to still do ionizing radiation CAT scans at times, but better be an overwhelming indication.
Right.
And it better really be we're not going to just do it on a whim, like you have a fear of brain cancer and then do a brain
just to put my
CAT
mind
scan.
at ease.
Yeah, we're not going to put your mind at ease with something that is potentially aging that organ and other associated areas. So yeah, I think that it really came about there where you saw the animal data, where if you want to take a mouse and basically make it twice as old, you just radiate the mouse.
Right.
All of a sudden it's got gray hair and it's hobbling and arthritis presents. You've just prematurely aged that mouse. So I think that, you see that a couple times and it gets you thinking that better be a really, really strong indication.
Well, there's also another factor, which is there was a time, and I think I could even quote you on this, when we were wrestling with something regarding me, and you said, and this is maybe 15 years ago, and you said, you know what? If you were 75, I'd say, let's do the scan because, by the time that catches up to you, you'll be gone. But at your age, I'm worried about, well, now with the advancements of, anti-aging and now we're looking at a longer lifespan, then maybe there isn't a age where you go, nah, just blast them with radiation.
That's true. I mean, you look at, say, the data we really have, in Japan, post-radiation and also obviously in Ukraine after Chernobyl, the damage accrues either immediately or it takes 25 years in certain instances. So we used to say, you're 65, we don't really care what happens to you at 90. And now we're going, maybe that's not true.
Right. Okay. How do you personally define longevity?
Well, to me, longevity is extending quality life,
so
as you
health
alluded
span,
to.
not lifespan.
So I think I'm saying, health span, no one wants to live to be 123 and break the world record if you're infirm and sitting in a wheelchair. However, if you're still engaging with your, great grandkids and you're still able to read the paper and keep up, I think everybody would want to hang in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Give me one daily habit that truly makes a measurable difference in how long and how well we live. What's the first thing that comes to your mind of a
Waking
daily?
up first thing in the morning and exercising.
So you believe in exercising early in the day, first thing?
I believe in exercising at a time that works for you, but most people that have a job, you got to get it out of the way when the phones aren't ringing and your boss isn't up your keister. And that's like a guaranteed time. And it also helps sync your sleep. So you get a twofer.
Circadian rhythm.
You bump your circadian rhythm because that's next is trying to pick an exact wake-up time. So if you get the exact wake-up time and then you don't get time to think and say, oh, I feel horrible, I'm not going to work out, you're still too groggy and you get out the door. And I'm like the biggest exercise fanatic in the world. And I'm like, oh, I'd like to stay in bed. But when I'm out for 10 minutes, I'm going, thank God I got out the door.
Right.
So I think that's the number one habit, and that syncs your circadian rhythm as well as gets you out and gets you fit.
But isn't it true that for most of your professional life, you were in the office by 6 or 6:30 in the morning?
Yeah, but I always worked out at 4:30.
That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
you would wake up at 4 or 4:30 and work out.
Yeah.
So take me through. I kind of know some of this, but I want you to explain it. Because I'm sorry, but you are a perfect example of why you should do this shit. Because he's not a young man, but he looks amazing. And it's also not just you're blessed with good looks and good genes, but you do the work.
I don't think I'm blessed with good genes at all. My uncle died at 52 of heart disease. My dad needed bypass surgery.
That's right. We share
way
that, yeah.
before my age. And, my mom died relatively young of this idiosyncratic pulmonary fibrosis. So, yeah,
But your dad lived to be pretty
my
old,
dad
right?
lived to be up in his 90s
But
and did
not a
pretty
healthy...
good. But yeah, he was kind of a little bit like your dad. He never lifted a finger, trying to do anything other than his job.
Take me through. I want some specifics though. So do you still do that? You still wake up at like 4:30?
No, I've got like a new easy life. I wake up at 5 now.
Okay,
so I wake up at 5.
What a lazy son of a bitch you are.
And then so I'll have like an easy day and a hard day. So the hard days I work out 90 minutes and the easy days I work out 60 minutes. And then
with coffee or with any kind of...
No, I've never drank coffee my whole life. So
you're
I've never been a
fasting.
caffeine person. Yeah, I'm always
But
fasting.
you're doing water, you're chugging water, do you...
No, I never drink water.
You never drink water?
Well, I don't drink water till I get back. I mean, when I get back, I've got a little routine. But no, I have like a loose gastroesophageal sphincter. So if I were to eat before I worked out, and this certainly isn't true for everybody else, I'd upchug. So yeah, I can't eat within 4 hours of exercise.
So you wake up, give me an example.
So I wake up at about 5, and then it'll only take me, I'll try to move pretty quickly. So I'll be out the door by 5:10,
And you're running first.
Well, I have all different workouts, mainly now just because my knees are so bad, I've kind of had to eschew long distance running. So pretty much my runs will be interval runs up a pretty steep hill. So I'll pick out a 2-mile section of a pretty steep hill in the hills of Hollywood. This is where they come in handy, and kind of do a 2-minute, gasping for air run. And then I'll walk down over a period of about 4 minutes. So it'll be a 6-minute cycle, so I'll do 10 of those. That would be a hard day, and then I'd come back and do weightlifting for 30 minutes. And then the easy day, I'd either do, maybe I'd go out and shoot baskets, under the lights in Hollywood. Play tennis with me. Or play tennis with you. I'd do that for, say, 60 to 90 minutes, or do something a little bit more social. And rotate things like that. And then if I was really sore, maybe I'd do a rowing machine, or I would also, some days when I'm doing my easy days, I'll walk at 3.4 miles an hour at 14% grade, and I'll do that for an hour, and then just never really.
What are you doing? What are you doing when you're doing that cardio? Are you watching something? Are you listening?
Yeah, when
to
I
something?
do that cardio, I'm always doing medical podcasts, so I'm doing a little learning, thing. But once you do hard exercise, nothing goes in your brain, so you really can't do that. You can play music, but you can't really remember anything when you're working out hard.
I have to, if I'm on a machine, which is really rare because over the last 15 years especially, I got to be outside. And I'll stay outside for as long as I possibly can because I love it. Even if it's chilly, I just need to be outside. I need vitamin D, natural vitamin D, and I just love working out, getting a workout, getting my cardio in the great outdoors, no matter what.
Always.
But I have to, when I'm doing a hike or anything, I don't want any other sensory. I just want to be in the moment. I want to smell the air. I want to hear what's going on. But when I'm on an elliptical or if I'm on a treadmill, I can't do it without a distraction. I have to be listening to music.
It's very boring. I mean, machines should only be for checking your pace. In other words, when I do a treadmill, I just want to say, okay, I've been out running. Am I running at the right speed? And, check your speeds. And then also by doing those VO2 max or faux VO2 maxes, I know, hey, am I doing enough, or am I lacking, or am I lackadaisical? Because I see my numbers are dropping, just like, the biggest revelation I had with my little N of 1 experimentation was, for a long time, I decided I was going to do intermittent fasting. And people may or may not know this, when you work out really vigorously, you bump up your lactate, and that's like a really strong anti-appetite thing. So I really have no appetite in the morning, and all of a sudden my weight has been so steady, my muscle mass has been so steady. I noticed all of a sudden, oh my God, I lost, I think it was 11 pounds of muscle, and it was just like, that was shocking to me. And that was from not eating anything until say 1 o'clock and working out at 5 o'clock or 4:30. So that doesn't work for me. So I desperately had to go back and rework things at that point. So that's why there are some benefits to really checking yourself closely with the body composition, because even somebody like myself that does that for a profession can be fooled sometimes by doing what I felt was a healthful change in my routine.
I want to talk about Biggest Loser for a minute. So there was just this Netflix documentary which you were in, and it was really well done, really good. I remember, because we were friends long before that, I remember when you called me, you said, Ricardo, I'm going to do this TV show, and I have several questions about it. But the one that I'm most curious about actually also relates to your history as a sports doctor, where you were the team doctor for the Raiders for years. You come from an athletic background yourself. You're a wrestler. But you played all sports, right? You played rugby and football. Yeah. So you've always been an athlete, which makes sense. And you've always been a real sort of, I think, understanding ear for the athlete, which made you such a great doctor.
I've had most of the injuries, so I can be mildly empathetic.
So and I want to do a deeper dive on Biggest Loser, but one thing I was curious about in terms of a correlation, when you look at the contestants who thrived under the conditions of the show, The Biggest Loser, and you look at the condition of the athletes who were training actively when they were playing, and then you take all that away, is there a consistency or is there a group that will continue to thrive based upon what they learned in training themselves into peak performance that will last them a lifetime? Or is there a similarity, like athletes, once they're done playing, their health goes to shit, or their weight goes up, or their fitness goes away? And the same thing with the contestants on the show.
Well, we've definitely got the answer for the contestants on the show, because we only had them for 6 months. The show would be 6 months to 9 months, and obviously pro athletes are maybe doing it for 15 years. So the time is a lot different that they're reinforcing that habit. But for the Biggest Loser contestants, all of whom weren't exercising when the show started, and all of them that were in horrible shape. There was a small fraction that were good athletes when they were in college or high school, but that was a minority. But we know that 6 years later, they got very little help, because doctors just aren't that helpful, and they don't have great trainers, and everything's so expensive that these people who were kind of, really didn't have the resources to pay for all that. We knew that about 30% really stuck with the exercise. So during the show, they were working out, let's say 3 hours a day. And the ones that were successful at year 6 continued to work out on average about 75 minutes a day. About the same as what I work out. We used to always push, 9 to 10 hours. I used to tell them that's what you're going to have to do if you want to keep the weight off. And the other group, say the, 60% that regained their weight, they tended to work out about 15 minutes a day when you looked at them, 6 years later. So yeah, I'm trying to push myself for a Nobel Peace Prize, because we kept the weight off 30 to 40% of those Biggest Losers, and they kept off, say, 25% of their weight, and the other group regained all. So the average weight loss stayed at about 12 to 15%, which is massive, because before the Biggest Loser study at 6 years, the very best anybody had ever done, top universities following people long-term, was about 6% weight loss at 6 years. So we just crushed the world record for long-term weight loss. And yeah, we kept about 30 to 40% of them addicted to exercise. Now go to pro athletes. Yeah, it's disappointing when our guys, let's say when I was with the Raiders, when they retire, there's a percent of them that hate exercise so bad. They've been yelled and screamed at by coaches. It's not fun because it's work. They make money, but they hate it. And they just go home and they never want to see a game on TV. They don't want to lift a finger. And then there's other people like myself and you that just kind of are exercise junkies, and they continue to work out and they continue to look really good. And that's the majority of pro athletes. You know, I'd say only about, 10 or 20% really fall off, whereas at The Biggest Loser, it was somewhere 50 to 60%.
Right. Because they didn't have that background.
They didn't have the reps. I mean, if you're
Right.
doing it for 10 years and all of your college life and all of your high school life, you're getting reps and you're getting a little bit more addicted. The problem with pro athletes, and the real reason is, I say that there's 6 pillars of health that we have to go. They're incredibly disadvantaged in terms of arthritis. So they're struggling to do what you and I can do because of injuries. And that's what's holding them back more than anything else. They physically can't walk. So how are you going to work out when, you need artificial shoulders, you need artificial hips, you need artificial knees, and then the ankles are killing you. So that's what holds my pro athletes back.
I'm not being unsympathetic to that, because it's absolutely a thing. And I've experienced, in my own way, I've had, I had to have my hips replaced, and
You've had your share.
Yeah, but I worked out through pain a lot because it was so important to me. Also, from a vanity standpoint, which is something else we'll talk about. But, and I'm not being unsympathetic to that. But I remember saying to you years ago, this is one of the other things that's indelible, something you said to me. Because when I was in so much pain with my hips, and I thought, I said to you, what if one day I have an injury or something happens to me and I can't do, and you went, I'll put you in the pool, Ricardo. I'll make you swim, and there's always
the end of the line for athletes. That's the end of the line exercise. But
it's still something. And if you do it vigorously, you can stay in great shape. A lot of swimmers are in really great shape, right?
True. And then we had, as you may know, just jumping back to The Biggest Loser, we had a number of people that had leg stress fractures, whether it's tibial, or we even had a woman that had a stress fracture of her hip, so a hip fracture on Biggest Loser. And she continued to lose 6, 7, 8 pounds a week. How? We threw her in the pool. Right. She kept dog paddling, walking, swimming, whatever it took. So yeah, you can be really hurt bad and still get really good weight loss exercise in a pool.
If you were to, not that you won't, if you were to create a new show based upon that, what would be different? What would be the first thing that you would say, we're not doing that again?
Well, the first thing that we wouldn't do is put anybody's health at risk. And the problem with the show, which I think is pretty widely recognized, is you can't have a weight loss show that's perfectly safe, as I think I said there. Mm-hmm. Because if the prize money's high enough, let's say the prize money's $1 million, $10 million, eventually you're going to cut off your right arm because, you want to lose a little bit more. How can a weight loss show be safe? It can't. But a fat loss muscle gain show can be very safe. So that's really the ticket for revamping that mode of a TV show.
Also, let's get into this a little bit, because the factors or the circumstances that made the show, and this is all laid out in the documentary about the show on Netflix. What percentage responsibility do you take for any of that, of things that were unsafe? Or was it really that they were being pushed in a way by people who were not properly trained to do what they were doing?
Yeah, everybody has to, have some accountability based on what they do. And that's true also if you're a doctor for the NFL. How much accountability do you take if you're getting a paycheck as a doctor for an NFL team? How much accountability do you have if people get head injuries? So I kind of took that stance on the show and basically would take all the contestants aside every year. And this was talked about a little bit, I think, there, but certainly, widely recognized, and told all the contestants, this show, forget it. This is all BS. Try to get healthier. And if you just try to lose weight, you're going to potentially hurt yourself. You're going to get into a lot of trouble. And I would tell them that repeatedly, literally on an every week basis. So if I take care of you and you're my patient, is it legitimate if I take care of you and you elect to do cocaine weekly or to smoke cigarettes or to climb Mount Everest without oxygen? how much responsibility do I take if I am your doctor and you smoke cigarettes? Should I fire you? Should I have left Biggest Loser? Because there was a chance they wouldn't listen to my recommendations. So I felt very comfortable actually on the show because I gave them very clear recommendations what to do, and I told them what the temptations were going to be and how they were going to try to cut the recommendations, the recommended nutritional intake, the recommended exercise. And I told them how I thought in the long run, and maybe even the short run, that was going to hurt them. But if they elected as adults, it would be different if these were kids. If they elected as adults to listen to that and decided to potentially listen to another individual there, no, I didn't feel, I felt bad, but not an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Although I fought every year whether to resign on that basis. But, I decided that they deserved, the people that wanted to hear what I thought was the right way to do it deserved to have somebody telling them that.
Mm-hmm. Did you get into it with some of the trainers and people involved in the show?
Sure.
Like
every year we had huge discussions to try to change and as you may or may not know, season 1 kind of went with my recommendation. We did a show that was based on fat loss and muscle gain, and we had huge penalties for dehydration. And so we had huge penalties given out to several people season 1 because they were dehydrated. So the word got out. So, they were doing it that way, but their feeling was, and I can understand their view too, that America wasn't ready for a nuanced show about fat loss and muscle gain. They wanted to know weight loss. And that number resonated with so many millions of people that the network people decided to go with that for their own reasons. So I pushed as hard as I could and then told them that, that would incentivize people to dehydrate and to lose muscle, which is counterproductive when you're trying to lose weight. You want to lose fat, you don't want to lose fluid, and you don't want to lose muscle. But, I guess, there's some culpability if I take a check, but I did feel comfortable that I really read the contestants, the Riot Act, and,
But I'm saying, did you ever have circumstances with Bob or Jillian, or both, where you became aware of methods that made you go to one of them or both of them and go, guys, you're going to hurt somebody or somebody's going to get killed. You can't do it this way. Did you ever get in anybody's face that way?
I was the principal on the show. So I would go to the people running the show and say, this is kind of a non-starter. And then they would go back. I didn't really, especially Jillian, really have any face-to-face dealings with her.
So we've talked about metabolic health and how it's the foundation of everything. Wouldn't you agree? Okay.
I would agree.
Is there a single food or behavior that just wrecks it forever?
I think that's a misconception, that there are certain just horrible bad foods or amazing good foods. There's really not. The body has such a system. In other words, if you're really working out vigorously and you're in a major caloric deficit, you can have certain amounts of sugar and the body handles it just fine. You can have certain amounts of fruit, the body handles it fine. In other situations, even a little bit of sugar is just straight out poison. So there's different situations. And that's why it's really not a one size fits all. And you can't just have some people say, okay, this fruit is miraculous. It's got all these phenomenal phytochemicals. But if you're eating that one fruit every day at the exclusion of all the other rainbow of other fruits and vegetables, you're markedly hurting your health. And that's why, people that just have the same breakfast every day, I think, are making a big mistake. But you can go all the way from a carnivore diet to absolutely no meat, and you can get a very healthy diet on both ends of the spectrum. And so the whole religiousness of one type of diet is superior, I don't think is founded in any science. There are multiple ways to get there. Some diets are much harder to get there, but you can get there with a lot of different diets, and that's a huge spectrum.
I would agree, just upon all the research that I've read and even my experimentation. I believe that when it comes to diet, I would totally agree that there's no one specific bad guy.
There are better things for different people. Some people respond better to certain high, low protein, high, low carbohydrate, things of that nature. But as a rule, there are some successes in all the different buckets of diets.
But forget diet when it comes to behavior, would you agree that? So if you're doing everything right, your diet is great, your fitness level is great, you're getting good sleep, you're doing it all right, but you still smoke cigarettes, would you point to that and go, what the fuck are you doing? Or would you go, you're okay to smoke some cigarettes?
Well, we see that all the time. People will have, whether it's, high-risk intercourse, or they'll have high-risk hobbies, where they're endangering their health, or they'll be in social situations where they're just, wreaking havoc on their emotions. And you're like, bro, what are you thinking? So yeah, we do see that a lot.
But I'm saying specifically, if you're doing everything right, but you still smoke, wouldn't you point to that as being, that's going to defeat the purpose?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I mean, I'm not trying to make a big anti-smoking, but I would.
I'm like a huge anti-smoker, and it's interesting that cigarettes has radiation, it has all these tars. It increases your chance of death by this massive 20-fold, and like you'd really have to be a moron to do it, although it does have some positive benefits. It may help people with ADHD, and it is something that organizes certain people's minds. So you can't go at it where it's just uniformly all bad. Same thing with cocaine.
Well, but the ways that it helps, like for instance, if it's helping, if it is proven, if there's peer-reviewed science that says, it actually helps ADHD, is there something that also helps it that isn't?
Far better with no side
effects,
of
wouldn't you
course.
just definitively go, cigarettes,
but you have to, with some respect,
plus.
Understand people with addictions.
Of course.
We're allowing people with carbohydrate addiction, we're allowing people, that's okay American, but cigarette addiction. And by the way, that's one of the few public health things we've done well on. When I started out being a doctor, I think we're up in the 40s, and now we're down in the teens, for cigarette smokers in America. So we made giant strides. Obesity's going out of control, but smoking's going down. But I just will add, if you look at what's the negative on your longevity smoking cigarettes, you probably drop it down, in the range of 200 to 300%. But if you're super fit, you raise it 500%. So I want to give you an idea of relative things. So when I say I want you at the top 2 or 3%, we're not dwarfing, but we're a multiple of the negative effect. If you did the worst thing that you can kind of think of in your head, I can overdo that with extreme fitness. So believe it or not, I'd rather have somebody like me that's like in the top 1% for their age group and is smoking cigarette is probably a better health approach than somebody not smoking and not doing any exercise and being in the lower quadrile of exercise. Now that sounds crazy, but
Well, and those are extreme examples.
Those are extreme examples.
I also have a problem with, I guess my real issue with smoking, other than I think I have a relationship to it because I saw the toll it took on people I loved over the years. But it's also, if you...
Well, it hurts other people. That's
what
my
I'm say.
thing.
If you drink too much, you don't get behind the wheel of a car, you're not affecting anybody else.
Agreed.
You eat, your diet is shit, you're not affecting anybody else. But you light up a cigarette in public...
Well, you are a little bit, though, because you're raising the insurance costs for all other Americans.
If you, we scroll, right? You scroll on Instagram and we follow each other and... And I love that you're a good source of information and updates on things. So when it comes to all the stuff that I keep seeing when I'm scrolling, peptides, stem cell, gene therapy, all these things that we're reading about and that are getting attention, what are you the most excited about in terms of longevity of those kind of things right now?
Well, if I was making the money they are, that's what would really excite me. But
it's going to lead to my next question. But
none of them are really ready for prime time, sadly. So you get these internet peptide mavens, their cocktails, because I see patients that are on them, include, the weight loss drugs, tirzepatide and semaglutide, and they include often testosterone, and they include often growth hormone agents. And I'm kind of against growth agents. And so I have a bone to pick with those drugs. I think they make people feel better. Like, who wouldn't feel better with a big boost of testosterone? But you've got, when you got that ruddy red look, and you've got some downside from that short term, and I think theoretically long term. So, sadly, stem cells are going to be phenomenal. They're just not ready yet. We can't ascertain that when you get stem cells in most situations. There's one or two exceptions that they're alive when you put them in, and we're still struggling to give them the right directions to have them go where they're supposed to go to do their magic. And then when you're talking about these peptides, other than huge profits for the people that are pushing them, there's essentially zero data on them in humans. So people say, well, what's your opinion? How can I have an opinion of something where there's no data? I mean, if you ask me about plasma exchange, or you ask me about NAD precursors, you ask me about rapamycin, there's a little hint of human data, so we can talk about it. And there's a plethora of animal data. There's very little animal data and no human data. So, is that really what you want to jump on board? Something that's really never been tested? Well, I guess if you're in bad shape, if you're really desperate and you have a horrible pain and doctors say there's nothing we could do, yeah, I'd take everything under the sun. But if you're doing really well, if you're me, for instance, and I feel like I'm doing really well, why am I going to experiment with something that's never been out there? Why am I going to do, a quote unquote Brian Johnson and take 105 separate substances? I want to take, and I'm taking some stuff, I want to take a limited number of things and test them. That doesn't mean they're going to work, and it may kill me, by the way, because the stuff I'm taking is also not nearly tested to the level that you could say it's going to work or not work.
I mean, that's kind of like
but at least there's something.
You were pretty at the forefront of NMN and we have to talk about that because you had a crazy accidental byproduct of that.
Backhand discovery.
Yeah. So we started talking about this, what?
It was back in 2000. Ago? Well, we started working on it in 2016, 2017. So It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
But the little thing that you actually peripherally got involved in was, I think, 2020.
Right. So talk about what that was, the origin of it, what your expectations of it were, what so far the reality of the effectiveness. Talk about first to tell what NMN is
NMN is an essential compound that is ubiquitous in the body, and it's one enzymatic step away from NAD, which is an essential coenzyme for a number of different enzymatic processes and mainly DNA healing. That's why I was really interested in. And in 2016, there was a mouse study that showed it turned the mitochondria of the equivalent of a 65, 70-year-old mouse into a 25-year-old mouse. And that was just so exciting. It was just like, oh my God. So that doesn't mean that has similar implications in humans, but that's when everybody, really hunkered down, and that's pretty much all that we studied. And so we advanced to a point, and this is something that my brother was intimately involved in, where we had a compound of agents and an amount, because that's critical. If the mouse gets this, what do you give a human? And we had early human data that it was safe, because medicine is first do no harm at the end of the day. You'd love to get a massive finding, but this was first do no harm. So we had something, and we were testing it on, we got about 30 individuals to test it on. They were all biohackers, and they all signed something saying this is, experimental. We're not sure exactly what the good or bad is, but, we have hope. I'm taking it. And something really funny happened. We got there was a really bad influenza outbreak in the end of 2019. No, 2019. Wow.
Right.
100 years off. And I need more brain help.
I was going to say,
yeah,
it's not working.
And so we noticed that this compound was having people come back much quicker, and it looked like the influenza wasn't quite as severe. At least this substance wasn't interfering with the body handling influenza and then getting over it. Because we know a lot of substances that lower immunity, the drugs we give for rheumatoid arthritis, the drugs we give for psoriasis, the strong ones, they lower the autoimmune, they lower inflammation at the cost of lowering your immunity. So this combination we were using markedly lowered inflammation. We saw that right out of the chute. And I thought it wouldn't help for somebody like me that was in great shape, but my inflammation markers, my cytokinines went down by about 35%. So that was really exciting. And then all of a sudden, the study, we ran into this syndrome called COVID-19. And I had multiple patients that were literally in the hospital dying from this virus. There was no treatment at that point. There was no antivirals whatsoever. And so there they were just crashing down. And I said, well, we've got this substance that we're testing. We've tested it for about a year or so in multiple people. It appears to be safe over a limited time period, markedly lowers your inflammation. And you can get a virus and it looks like it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to impair your ability to handle a virus. So we kind of went to these people that were dying and said, well, you've got no other choice. We can maybe try this thing that we believe may have anti-aging effects on your immune system. And I don't know if you know this, but when people get COVID, severe COVID, what do you think happens to their COVID tests when they're dying? Do you think the COVID test is negative? They get rid of COVID.
Right.
So all these elderly people, they see the COVID, they get rid of the COVID easy. They put out this massive amount of inflammation. But the problem with COVID was you couldn't put the switch to turn off the inflammation. So the inflammation continued, literally ate up your own lung, your own heart, your own liver,
it wasn't
caused
COVID.
blood clots.
It's like people,
COVID didn't kill you.
It's like cancer doesn't actually kill people. It's all the cancer wreaks havoc on the system.
Collateral damage from all the inflammation that killed it. So we went and we started this in a couple incredibly sick people, and they were literally, it was like at first I didn't believe it. They literally got better.
I'm going to interrupt you because I remember the story about one woman. Uh-huh. You got to tell that story about her because it's such a compelling story. Because you literally went to the family and you went, and you said to me, I knew she wasn't going to make it through the night. And then you did. Is it true that you woke up or you were just, oh my God, what if we tell that story?
It was something like that. We had a woman that basically her oxygen saturation was literally by the hour deteriorating, and they were going to take her to the ICU. She wrote a goodbye note, nice to know you, to her 3 daughters, was like so tearful. And I just said to the family, and they were screaming, calling every drug company, we need these antivirals. They couldn't get them. So I just said, I've got a substance. It appears to have an effect on the immune system that's positive, and it markedly lowers inflammation. This woman, in parallel to her dropping oxygen saturation, had just serially elevated inflammation markers. So we gave it to her. She was like moribund in bed. She hadn't moved for like 2 days. Her temperatures were 103, and she basically just couldn't move. So I brought the stuff in. It's a liquid that we give individuals, and basically had to spoon it in her. She wouldn't drink it. She was just too sick. So I basically sat in there. It took me about an hour to give her the liquid that you should be able to drink in, 3 minutes. And the next day I went there, she was up walking.
Unbelievable.
And the day after that,
she went home.
She went home. I've never seen anything like it. And of course, all the other doctors said, rightfully so, well, there's a lot of idiosyncratic reactions to this virus. So then we went and tested it on 10 other people that were really sick. And you can maybe jump in because you were one of the people during this brief period that had this death-defying illness that we still are struggling with. But you, out of the 10 people, were the one person that tested negative for COVID. So we said, you've got something, but it's not COVID. So we kicked you out of the study. And so we ended up just going with 9 of the 10 people we had. But it was really miraculous. And so I wrote that up in an article. And, it's interesting. This is a whole nother story on the advancement of medicine. Of course, the hospital had their own studies and, they basically poo-pooed it. But it was really, I've been a doctor for 50 years. It was kind of a miraculous turnaround in these super sick people. And, when you're doing anti-aging, it's like watching paint dry on a wall. You go, because people ask me, I've been on it for about 7 years, do you feel different? No, not really. But I guess that's a good thing because I'm not feeling...
But you've told me you've noticed a few things.
There's a few things. I think it helps for arthritis, which is definitely an inflammation-based disease.
And your penis doubled in size. That's
It was
good thing.
triple. I don't know what you're downsizing me. You're going to cut into my social life. But yeah, maybe my hair's thicker,
Yeah.
and so, and I got to try to keep up with you. That's like the one thing that we're
so lucky.
We've got. Speaking of that, did you tell the story about when you gave me backstage passes, and I'm trying to get in the back door, and a fan comes and says, "I want your autograph." I'm like, "I'm nobody famous." "I know you're Richard Bar-" I said, "No, no, he's inside." "I know, give me this." I had his
So he signed my name.
I signed his name. And
We
then I
have
started
gotten-
singing for him, but that's another story.
Well, I definitely sing better than you do. But I chalk that up whenever, and it's happened periodically throughout our friendship, where somebody, or when we're together at a party or something, and people look at us and go, "You guys look like brothers." And I'm just like, the job,
I have
it's a
to
job. We
insist
have a
that
good
I'm
job
the lower
on it.
brother, the younger brother. But yeah, it is funny because we get that occasionally
do.
that we're related.
We should reference that. You kind of mentioned my mystery illness. I don't want to get too deep into it, but what's interesting to me in terms
We can
of
all get sick. Life is short.
inflammation.
Yeah.
I got sick a few months before what we knew was COVID. And so I remember when we were trying to figure out what was wrong with me, you went, "Dude, maybe you were patient zero," because there was nothing like this. And I was on the road,
And you were
I was doing
traveling a
shows,
lot.
and I ended up in a hotel room in Montclair, New Jersey, having convulsions and thinking, "Oh, I'm going to die." Like I felt like I was shaking so uncontrolled, thrashing. And I just remember thinking, as good a shape as I'm in, my heart can't handle this. This is like, I'm going to die here. And it finally subsided after like 10 minutes. And I crawled across the floor to the shower. And I started to just feel a little bit better. And 104 fever. And of course, I ended up going and doing a show that night. The show must go on. But it happened to me a couple times. And when I came back, you sent me, and I was tested
everything.
for everything. And everything came back
It's a real enigma.
So then it happened to me again early in COVID when we were in the lockdown, and you went, "Okay, well, then you had a version of this." And you said to me, "There's no way you don't have COVID." And you had set up a testing way to test where it was social distancing and everything. And you tested me 4 times.
Yeah, I was absolutely convinced that you were a false negative.
But the point is that when I was going through that illness, you said to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I remember. You said to me, "Your inflammation levels are unlike anything I've really ever seen. So there's something really wrong."
I think that's why I was so convinced it was COVID because, for a healthy young person, you had that same...
Young-ish.
You had that same kind of panel, those same marker.
You said your numbers are absolutely through the roof.
Yeah.
And then it just went away. It's a much longer story, which we can tell sometime, but cut to, I guess,
That's
2.5
a different podcast, medical stories to tell.
The mysteries. 2.5 years later, I'm about to turn 60, and I make a decision that I'm going to eliminate as much added sugar from my diet as possible. And it's a big transformation for me because I used to love sweets. And
everybody does.
Yeah. So I cut out, it was a not miraculous, it was a very severe change that I stuck to and I stick to. And then I did a body scan, and you called me and you said, "Ricardo, I can't believe I'm saying this." Because a couple of years ago when you were sick and we didn't know what was wrong with you and your inflammation was through the roof, you right now have no traceable inflammation in your body. That's what you said to me. And then you said, "Have another martini." I'm your doctor, I shouldn't say that, but whatever you're doing is working for you. And so, I think that just because I made that change in my diet and I had this incredible result, which we just did it again, and again you said, your inflammation is non-existent. I chalk that up to the lack of added sugar in my diet, but I bet you could take somebody who does the same thing and their inflammation's high. So it's like there's no...
Well, when your inflammation was really high, there's still a high probability you had some other oddball virus or, fungal infection.
Twice.
It's
because I had it
strange.
6 months apart.
Very strange.
But it's so weird because I have not had even a head cold since then, and that's 4 or 5.
Well, all the horrible things that we scared you with,
Yeah.
those are for sure gone.
Yeah,
you know?
don't remind me
Yeah,
of that.
we won't even go there.
Oh, this is a good question. If you had one patient, maybe me, with, well, not unlimited money and motivation, but if you had one patient with unlimited money and motivation, what would the ultimate health optimization protocol look like? You get a dream patient who you know is going to follow your instructions to the letter. What would it look like?
Well, the first thing is, I mean, for these people with, $100 billion, it has always surprised me that they wouldn't have a medical team literally at their side and, doing the monitoring and, giving them cogent advice about, okay, this is exactly what we need to be doing now and kind of, going moment for moment. They're kind of up your keister, but they wouldn't have to be anymore with kind of remote monitoring. So I think that that's part of it because people, get into their lives so much they forget the simple things. And then the other thing is to really monitor very intensely your response to any of these new emerging types of treatments and to really do a science-based analysis to see what works and what doesn't work because, we're all a little experiment N of one. And I think really that's the personalized medicine approach where you really try the 4 or 5 things that may be big advances in medicine and give them a tryout.
I guess what I'm saying is you take somebody like Brian Johnson, who, all power to him, it seems like that's not a life I would want to be living. And he's really into it, and he's nerded out on it in a way that he's making a great living, and he's become a celebrity because of it. But in terms of, I guess what I'm asking you is, how much would you have someone monitoring things, and what would those things be? Would it be a daily, this is a guy that I think is constantly testing himself for 50 things a day.
That's what he's advertising himself as the most tested person, but he's certainly not kind of the most functional. In other words, his VO2 max is close to mine, and the amount of weight he can lift is close to mine, and he's like 30 years younger. So it's not like he's in such great shape.
Right.
And I'm not convinced that he is living a life that is really joyful and happy. And, from what you read in the papers, obviously, there's issues with other people in his life. So I don't think he's maxing out on the enjoyment component, nor even the fitness component. So, I think that you need, people that aren't yes men. And most people with money get yes men,
Right.
and people want to tell the doctor what they want to go on. And so that's part of the problem. But I think if somebody had unlimited money, they would have a tight monitoring system where the doctor literally on a daily basis went over their numbers that were monitored from afar and just kind of gave them, an input. And unfortunately, the current monitor we have that you self-monitor, like let's just take the Oura Ring, and it tells you how much deep sleep you had and what your ability to exercise is that day. I think that's all bogus information.
Yeah,
so
right.
A lot of the feedback is just stuff that kind of screws you up where you go, I feel great today, or I feel terrible, and it's saying I should do a full-on workout. And I think that's where people are misled.
Yeah. Okay. This is a good question, I thought. You've worked with celebrities, billionaires, everyday people. Who generally takes your advice the best?
The people that are worth more tend to take it the best. The people that don't need it take my advice to heart, and the people that desperately need it tend to blow it off.
Wow.
More.
What do you make of that?
Human nature, In other words, people that desperately need a longevity doctor are not that interested. People that, like you, that could minimally benefit are like all into it. And it's interesting. It's like, I don't understand it, but a lot of people, I guess, give up. And the people that are really into it, they want incremental, you got that stereo system that's 99.8%, they want the 99.9%.
Yeah.
And that's the same with health. And it's sad. Yeah, And that's an old adage in medicine. If you give just out of courtesy free care for people, they totally discard what you say.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
People have to assume some kind of value, and the people that are the high net worth individuals, they really linger on what you say and will go back and forth on it.
What's a perfect example in your case of don't do as I do, do as I say? What's something that you do that you shouldn't do?
Well, I would say, sneak desserts periodically. So I've got a little bit of a sweet tooth. So I haven't quite fought off all my sugar. So that would probably be one of those things. I'm hoping, and I've kind of done the continuous glucose monitoring devices where my sugar doesn't really go up when I have sugar, because I mainly do it after exercise when I'm like sugar deficient. But, in a perfect world, that would be one area that may have some negative effects, even in the face of a caloric need, quote unquote. But yeah, I want to have a couple of ailments when I die. I don't want to be perfectly healthy.
What do you think about cheat meals and reward-driven things when it comes to food?
I think if you reward yourself with really vigorous exercise, then that's another twofer. You need the calories. In other words, you want simple carbohydrate because that gets in quickly. You want simple protein, whey protein, for instance, to get in quickly because you may get some benefit in terms of muscle synthesis by a quick absorption. So if you have kind of healthier, total food, the absorption may be much longer, and you have like fruit and vegetables, that carbohydrate is going to take a lot longer to get in. So there is a time that you might get a twofer, and you also can have, a sweeter thing if you do it post-exercise. So I try to do it mainly then.
Yeah.
And, I'm hoping for that twofer effect. And it seems to be true in me. But I've got an interesting thing that I just learned on I encourage everybody to wear a continuous glucose monitor and just see, hey, what's the effect of spaghetti? What's the effect of bread? What's the effect of, a banana?
Because it's different person to person, right?
Totally different person to person. And some people can tolerate fruit better or worse than others. And the other thing that was really odd for me was I found out when I start thinking about exercise, so first thing in the morning when I wake up, my sugar shoots up. So I never even realized this. This shows how little I know. The deeper you get in this, the more you learn.
Your sugar shoots up because you're anticipating the workout?
Anticipatory for exercise.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so if I do a fasting blood sugar and I'm going to do my exercise afterwards, I may get a spuriously elevated sugar. So, a lot of what we assume is gospel, you really start looking at this data in different individuals and you see really interesting stuff.
Yeah. All right, I want to switch gears completely for a minute.
My criminal record?
Almost.
Oh.
OJ.
Well, okay, close.
Because I've seen, the press that you've done for The Biggest Loser documentary and some other stuff. We haven't really talked about that. And now that he's dead, can I tell this quick story, my version of the story?
You can tell the story, but this is the sad part about being a doctor. You got HIPAA violations even when people have died.
Oh.
So, all the lawyers wrote stories about it. I really can't reveal a lot of the stuff, sadly. Some stuff I can.
Okay, well then I'll just ask you a question.
It's sad that, all the great stories I have, have to die with me.
Okay, well then, but I think you can, and you can tell me why, if that still falls under this. Mm-hmm. I think I can get around it though. When you were testifying in the OJ trial, I remember we were talking. In fact, I think we had dinner one night during that. And I asked
3 days.
I asked
Monday,
you.
Tuesday, and a Friday.
And I asked you, because you had known him for a while, and I asked you, what do you think? And you said, I really think he's innocent. I really think he didn't do this.
I played cards with him. He would announce the Monday night football games, jump on the charter back with us when we played Monday night games wherever, and, played poker with him. And he, as compared to some other cranky players, would always give autographs, was incredibly nice to all the people
charming,
that would
charisma.
So when I was in on the case, basically they asked me, because I happen to be an expert on on anabolic steroids. And one of the questions that Shapiro asked me to look into was, is it possible he did something heinous under the influence of anabolic steroids? So that's really how I got involved in this particular case. But, it was a trying time to, go on the stand, the first time I'd ever been in a courtroom. And, my prep was nothing, Meanwhile, the police officers testifying got something like a week worth of in-court prep, which is interesting. The ones that later were shown to be lying in their testimony. So maybe it's a good thing not to prep too much.
Didn't they label you a hostile witness at one point?
Yeah, I think I was a hostile. Of course, I did have a criminal record because during the morning of the chase.
Oh, that's right.
I told Bob, I said, I think he's got cancer. He had these big lymph nodes under his arms. So I said, I need to evaluate him. And he says, well, you've only got this Tuesday morning because we're going to turn him in for, jail. He's going to check himself in. So he said, okay, you got to be there at 7:30. So I get all my nurses and we go over there and we're doing skin tests because we didn't know if he had TB or he had coccidiomycosis or he had lung cancer or he had kind of a weird family history. So we're doing this whole big workup. And then the other doctors came in, Dr. Baden and Dr. He was the Asian world expert anyway. And they were examining him, and all of a sudden it was like 10 o'clock when they were supposed to turn him in. So Marcia Clark calls and says, hey, where is he? You're supposed to turn him in. So Bob Shapiro says, talk to Marcia Clark and, tell her why, he's not got. So I said, Marcia, we had to do these skin tests. You mother effer, you careless ass.
Marcia's reaming you out?
Yeah. And I'm like this, and I'm like, Bob, you said you're going to turn him in at 10. And he said, was it AM or PM? I'm like, son of a bitch. Anyway, so then so I'm sitting in the living room while they let OJ go back with his girlfriend. He had this great Victoria's Secret model that's there. So they kind of go back to do their thing.
Conjugal thing?
Yeah, and we're just in the living room, and I'm there with like Dr. Baden, and he's like regaling me with the autopsy of Martin Luther King, and I'm like, and John F. Kennedy, and I'm like, oh my God, it was just like, a doctor in a candy store. I'm listening to all these stories. And then Bob Shapiro says, okay, why don't you go up and get, OJ, and you ride with him to the jail because he's like a suicide risk. So I go up there, knock on the door.
Did you feel like he was a suicide risk?
Well, anytime you're going to jail, you're
But did you get a sense from your interaction with him that he was despondent?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Remember, you're under oath. So go ahead.
So I knock on the door, and the wide open windows, suicide note on the bed, and go, Bob, there's nobody here. So we turn on the TV, and the Bronco chase began. So, of course, then we called the police and said he's no longer here. So they came and arrested everybody. So we all got arrested for aiding and abetting a fugitive.
Did you actually go to jail?
No. There were some good lawyers there.
So, Mike, to leave this, all these years later, he's passed away. I know that there are things you can't talk about. Do you, as you sit here now, think that he committed that crime? Do you think that he did?
The evidence is very clear from the blood evidence. The problem is that the police took his blood that they drew at their station, and there was missing blood, So to convict somebody, it's very conclusive based on the blood evidence that he was guilty, but they took his blood to the crime scene. Now, it would be almost impossible to reproduce the location of the blood, but it's really hard to convict where the key witness, Furman, lied under oath, and the key mechanism of why it appears he's so guilty is the blood evidence, and there's missing blood.
And it's fallible.
And they took the blood to the crime scene. I mean, that's indefensible.
So there's enough reasonable doubt that you would still say, maybe not.
It's very hard to put a person to death, which is the penalty that you probably deserve for that heinous crime, based on those errors. And, I think the bottom line is the the legal system, they didn't, prosecute it very well,
Yeah, that is the case.
And even in my case, this is how silly, or I can't say stupid, I can say illogical. So I'm on the stand for 3 days. 140 million people are watching live. There's a huge amount of pressure. And so they interrogate me really hard. Basically, I'm saying this guy's got arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. He's got lymph nodes. He's got bad arthritis. He may have trouble moving and running. So they show a ad that he did that showed that it looked like he was moving his joints pretty well, and he had done it, say, a month before. And they're saying, well, wait, because my testimony was that, I was in my office and I remember him coming around the corner and he was just really limping, and they had me reproduce the limp and whatnot. So basically what they said in front of the jury is, okay, Huizenga is a liar. Look, here's the picture of him a month before. He's walking pretty well. And Huizenga's saying he's limping, so he's obviously lying. The jury didn't believe that. They believed me when they went back and talked to him. Why wouldn't they say, is it possible that he was limping because he was just in the fight of his life? Is it possible he's limping because his rheumatoid arthritis flared and he didn't have his medication? But they decided to take the tack. I'm lying. I'm a liar when I'm presenting the evidence to the best of my ability. They decided to say I'm a liar. There was a perfect additional explanation for why he was limping. This gives you an idea of the legal mind. They just want to say, "Oh, you're a liar." Wow, what did I say?
Right.
That
and
strikes
what would your
you as
motivation
not being
be to
true.
lie under oath?
Correct. Why would I lie for O.J. Simpson? What? I'm just telling. I examined him, and by the way, every picture I took, they were too unthorough to take their own police pictures. So.
Right.
A lot of the evidence that they had was me. I was the one that gave the evidence.
Right.
Why would I then do that if I was just pushing for his side? I wouldn't have, given all that data. And the cuts, they didn't even draw the whole panoply of cuts that he had.
Yeah.
I was the only one that put that together. So it's startling the lack of preparation professionals can have at certain times.
Especially in a case like that, case of the century, and people are only as good as they are at what they do, right? Did you have any interaction with him in the years before he died?
I did have one interaction that was it's a little bit scary.
It was? Can you talk about it?
I was walking through, I was in Las Vegas, and I was walking through a bar at the top of one of the restaurants, and all of a sudden I hear, Huizenga, Huizenga. And I walk over there, and there's Juice, and I walk there, and he goes, and he had this bevy of these incredibly hot blondes around him. And he whispers in my ear, look at me, I'm a chick magnet. And I said, okay, Juice. Because I was always so hopeful, and I said, just take care of your kids, Juice, please, for me.
Yeah.
Just go crazy as a parent and do the right thing, and things will work out. Just work really hard on your kids, because they're going to really take a hit on this. So there was some disappointment, because I liked him.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, now we're gonna do a rapid fire round. Are you ready?
I think I'm too old to do it too rapid, but
you got this. Coffee or matcha?
Neither.
You don't endorse either. Don't you? But there's some proven benefits of caffeine in coffee, right?
I think caffeine may be healthful, believe it or not. But I was answering for me personally.
I'm talking about as a physician.
I think black coffee would be what I would say for patients to do.
Okay. We already know the answer to this. Best time of day to work out. But is that true for everybody or just you?
Professional athlete, afternoon. Kind of a mom and pop workouter first thing in the morning, right when you wake up.
Because you're going to lose motivation as the day goes on and you get tired?
And things pop up and you're going to always have excuses.
Right. What's the supplement that you most believe in?
Probably creatine.
Creatine. Oh, that's a whole nother episode. So I want to get in. Well, we'll just talk about it. I'll share what he tells me later. What do you think about? Don't you think that that people are people generally these days lacking in vitamin D because they're too much sunscreen and they're too much indoors, or are you not seeing that?
Well, we know vitamin D levels tend to go down as you get further and further north in the world sphere, but there's another thing that I observed in Biggest Loser. We did a ton of research on Biggest Loser. I can't tell you how much stuff I learned, because a lot of people have the belief that a low vitamin D is a marker for lack of health. And they want to take vitamin D and they think they're going to get healthy. And one of the things that we see is as your adipose level goes up, your vitamin D goes down because it sucks it into the fat. So another way to make your vitamin D go up that we did in Biggest Losers without any vitamin D supplementation is just losing fat, and vitamin D levels go up. So I take a minority view that there are other explanations for low vitamin D. And yeah, I recommend vitamin D for all my people who are below 30, but I think there's, to think that you're unhealthy because it's low and vitamin D will reverse that, I think is possibly not correct.
Okay. What's a song you play when you need a reset? Do you have a go-to?
That's a great question.
I'll tell you mine. September by Earth, Wind & Fire. It's also a mood balancer for me because I've decided that I don't think any human being, no matter what's going on or how angry or depressed you might be, for 3 minutes and 24 seconds or whatever September is, you can't not go like this and feel better.
I would probably say it's, We Are the Champions, If I had
that's
to
a good
go
one.
to one, that
That's a
really
good one.
fired
That's a
me
good
up
one.
to go to another level.
All right, last rapid fire question. What's the one question patients ask you that secretly drives you bonkers?
Well, the number one thing is when they want platitudes for how much they're working out, but I have to keep that kind of on the down low. The question that they ask at bonkers.
Does it drive you nuts when someone, I'm not saying I would do this or have done this, comes to you and goes, but I read like Dr. Google, and you go, well, it's this, and I'll go, but I just read this other thing, and you're really great, at least with me, because you'll go, well, okay, but here's why that's wrong, or here's why I disagree with that, or whatever. But when people throw that stuff at you...
I actually like that. When people, do Dr. Google research, that's fun, because people are interested. I think...
Well, that's cool.
I think the thing that bugs me the most is when people complain about, like, small aches, and in my head, I'm thinking I'm hurting worse than they are, and that, like they'll complain about a real minor ache, and it's just like, you want to say suck it up, but then you have to kind of go into another mode.
Doc, it hurts when I walk this way. Don't fucking walk that way.
Like I have some aches when I get out of bed, and you're just like,
yeah,
trying to hold your mouth together. But people have to kind of be a little bit more reasonable about their aches.
That's fair. Okay, so I don't know if you've seen in the other episodes, but I always end with a gift of vinyl. I don't. Do you even have a turntable? Do you even have?
Yeah, I do. I've got a Tannenberg turntable.
When I give a gift of vinyl, I try to connect the dots in some way. And with you, I was thinking, because we've talked about music so much, and you were a big music fan and everything.
Huge music fan.
But I was thinking, what? And so I went into I have this whole stash of vinyl that I've collected for years, and I'm looking through and like, what? I'm looking for something to just go. And I wandered across this album, and I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting because it's a really interesting connection between two people, one of them being me and somebody else. So here's what it is. It's the soundtrack to a movie called The Goonies.
Oh, our Dick Donner connection.
Directed by your old friend Dick Donner.
Oh, that is so cool.
And this is before
gift.
I had a record deal, but I was writing songs. And one of the songs is by Philip Bailey of Earth, Wind & Fire, called Love is Alive, written by Philip Bailey and me. And I'm singing background vocals on it. And who else we have? Dave Grusin's on the record, REO Speedwagon, Cyndi Lauper, Tina Marie. Luther Vandross. There's another connection.
Those are all people that have made your birthday parties,
right?
essentially.
Yeah.
Oh, that
Isn't
is
that crazy?
so great.
So for that album
The
to have
Goonies
me, Kevin
soundtrack.
Cronin, who you know through me, right?
Sure.
Luther, you met through me.
Luther, I met through you
Dave
as well.
Bruce and all these people, but that it was a movie directed by Richard Donner, who was a dear friend of yours.
Did you know Chris Columbus? Or I'm thinking a different Columbus, the guy that was in that other band. There was another Columbus that was a friend of yours. Remember? I can't remember the group.
It's the second thing to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, thought that was cool.
That is so cool. Wow. Thank you very much.
And I want to wrap up by saying that, separate from our friendship, and when I would talk about you through the years and talk about your attention to detail and your commitment and your dedication, I think some people once in a while would be like, yeah, but you're friends, so you're getting extra special treatment. Or even in some cases, maybe somebody was like, yeah, but you're a famous singer or whatever. And I was like, no. I've seen this guy go the extra mile so
I really
many
appreciate
times.
that.
And I have so much respect for you. I love that we're pals. I love our horrible tennis matches. But
They get ugly, but
I'm very, very grateful for our friendship and your empty glass.
thank you
Thanks,
very
buddy. Thanks
much.
for being here.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.